You good with me vaping?
Oh yeah, you can
Totally
vape.
addicted. Totally addicted to the crap.
It's not just a prep thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to keep that intro in. So you don't actually know yet, Romana, but this is going to be the first episode of season 3. So my third year of running the podcast, and it's going to be on New Year's Day. Now, you know,
Sick.
yeah, for sure. So I was like, wow, we've got an episode on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And you already know that it's going to be part of the mental health series, but I've picked this episode to be the first one of the mental health series, which is going to be going on for quite a few weeks because I've got lots and lots of guests from all over the globe coming on. And I really do feel like the last podcast we did, such good feedback. And I feel like you and I have got a lot of the same values and morals. And you, of course, yourself have a lot to share in regards to mental health from yourself, but also the work.
Yeah.
So it's going to be super cool to talk about this chapter that you've just been through, right?
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I think when we did the last podcast, I think it was just after I had the interview for my new job. And it was like a weight off my shoulders. So some of the acute symptoms that I was like, the fear of having to go back to the ambulance service sort of lifted around that sort of time. So I've been really bad with updating my own Instagram with how, because I mean, prep just killed me. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to sort of like discuss where I was compared to where I am now, because I've completed one block of therapy since we spoke last, and I'm midway through a less intensive course of therapy, which is kind of the block I've completed really helped with the acute PTSD symptoms. That was rewind therapy, and now I'm sort of halfway through a course of CBT, which seems to help. Like, I've got a lot of bad mental habits from that period of so high anxiety and how long it went on for, and it's like breaking that cycle of kind of negative thinking and kind of rumination. So yeah, a lot's happened since the last podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And if people haven't listened, go back and find it because it was a very good episode. Now, we of course connected initially because what you touched on there, you shared a reel when you first started going through the diagnosis of PTSD. And actually, since then, I've done a podcast about the different levels of PTSD. So it was really interesting to talk about how there can be like really low level PTSD from something that's maybe like smaller, and to you internally, you're like, fucking hell, that was, massive to me, but other people might think it's quite small. And then you go up to, people at war or things that you've been through where it's like you can have your life at risk per se, and that would be your sort of standard what people think PTSD is. I think it was a really good way to sort of frame it and go, well, actually, any level of trauma can cause a level of PTSD.
It's like I had counselling back in 2019, and I was absolutely adamant I did not have PTSD. And the therapist that I engaged with at the time, he was a psychiatrist, and he was like, "No, I think you've got trauma, but I don't think it's PTSD." Since doing the rewind therapy that I did in July, I know that actually the symptoms of my PTSD have been going on a lot longer, and it's more of a kind of, because you've got your one-off really, really bad episode, you have your kind of similar episodes during a frame period of time, and then you can have PTSD from lots of different, and it's basically thinking about your like a trauma cup. And with complex PTSD, that cup just gets so full with the incidents themselves may not be enough to trigger a traumatic response, but when you keep filling that cup up, it's like oof. And that was kind of where I was this time last year. There was a shift, and it kind of went to, actually, these aren't memories, these are flashbacks, night terrors, then the physical symptoms that I spoke about in the previous podcast. And it's like, like you said, there's so many different levels of it. And I'm still learning about sort of different aspects of my personality that are integral and interlinked to the PTSD. And part of it makes me who I am now, but part of it is also intrusive into my life. I know that there'll always be an element of a possibility of those symptoms returning either to some low level. I still get occasional night terrors. They sort of, it's about maybe twice a month now, as opposed to kind of twice a week. And the flashbacks are more, if I do get them, they're smaller and they don't provoke such an irrational emotional response. I'm able to kind of go, oh, okay. Like I went on the tube for the first time last weekend, and there was some flashbacks that I had from that, and I was still able to carry on with my day. Whereas before we spoke, I think I remember telling you about 𝗵𝗲𝗄 and the fireworks going off, and that literally put me in a hole for like the next couple of days. Now it's like, oh, that's there, but I'm okay. And it's like being able to carry on and interact and not shutting down. So it's like, it's quite, thinking back on how far I've come is quite a positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it like anything, isn't it? We don't often reflect on, well, actually, because you're always, especially in bodybuilding, you're always striving for the next goal. So it's like, what do I need to get to here? What do I need to do to get to here? And then it's like, whoa, hold on a minute. And then you reflect and go, well, actually, in a fairly short space of time, you've actually come so far. And it's really nice as well for the listeners to hear. And I think there was a bit of an undercurrent there that actually getting a diagnosis for you, that was probably quite a big thing, right? With your, going into therapy as well.
It's that validation that you're not literally losing your mind, and there's actually a rational cause. And there's I did a bit of reading when I first got diagnosed around why, because I was quite sort of torn up in myself as to, well, why have I got it when other people can manage things? And it's almost that, is my mind not strong enough? Like one of the major triggers was the London Bridge terror attack for me. And that was like, that kind of filled my cup. Everything since then just piled on top and spilled over the top. But it's like at the time I was stressed with work, been through quite a dramatic breakup, having to move in because of like not being able to afford to live there anymore. And it's all these sort of other little weaknesses that can make you predisposed to having PTSD. It's not something that you can control or anything about. If it's going to happen to you, it's going to happen. You can't really prevent it. It's just shit.
Yeah, well, that's hard, for anyone when you come across something that's out of your control. It's like you've got to lean on, like, if you've got tools to cope with that, right, or life experience. But if it's something you're not used to, it's like you've got to act with your best defense mechanisms.
And that's normally the fight or flight panic mode that people will, because that's instinctual in us from when we were running around trying not to get eaten by various predators.
And actually on the last pod you said that you went into this last prep because actually pushing up in off season, it was hard to get the food down and hard to do what you needed to do to go any further in the off season. So the decision was, well, let's lend itself to the appetite suppression, etc. Do you feel now you've done the prep and you're off the back of it, was that the right decision?
So at the beginning of the year, definitely. What we found with the latter part of the Olympia prep, or the Olympia prep in general, like, I started prep in January, and yeah, there was a lot of appetite suppression that enabled that prep to kind of progress quite quickly. But ultimately, I've been in a really low body fat state from January. We never anticipated qualifying for the Olympia and never anticipated then having to continue on prep. So I think I worked out it's 46 weeks of the year, and I spent 40 of them on a diet. I had 6 weeks where we went to maintenance. 2 of those weeks were a little bit more intuitively eating and being a bit more relaxed. But other than that, it was like 40 weeks of dieting out of 52 of the year. So it was, in retrospect, I started a new job right as I began prep for the O. Did not anticipate how much pressure that was going to be putting on me. Because although the ambulance service with shift work is hard, I've done that for 18 years. I can do it standing on my head. I can do it. My brain is pre-programmed to ask certain questions and do certain things, no matter what my actual cognitive function is. But when you're sat trying to learn, and it was all internet learning, and when you're sat trying to do that, and you're hungry and you're tired, and the course itself was 8:30 to 5:30, Monday to Friday, for 7 weeks. And then I think from a month out, I went to 3 days a week. But then I'm still working 8:30 till 5 every day. So for the whole prep, basically, I was when my sleep allowed, I was getting up at 4:30, going over, doing my cardio, doing my steps, training fasted because I needed to save my food for when I was actually at work. I'd get a break. I'd be back over the gym. I'd be doing more steps, more cardio, depending on the length of the break. And then at the end of the day, again, back over the gym, finishing off my cardio, finishing off my steps. Then it was in the house, meal prep, shower, bed, repeat for like basically the whole prep.
Yeah, that is wild. I think as well, when we last spoke, it's really good for the listeners to hear, okay, you were prepping for the O, so this is like the elite level of bodybuilding, right? But I truly believe, and I know you align, that, you know, we don't get paid generally to be bodybuilders unless it is your job. And people have to work at the same time. And I think that people sort of see that prep, well, I can make it work. But when it gets to the depths of prep, like, yeah, you can't really describe what it's like when you've got a full-time job as well.
Learning a full-time job, like learning a new role. And it's like, yeah, I've got all my clinical knowledge, but it's applying it in a different way. I think it was after the first 7 weeks, I had a week of observing. So basically now I'm assessing people for disability benefit. So you're on the phone, you're asking questions. How do they do this? How do they do that? How does their condition affect them? So I had a week of observing. That was fine because I was just listening. And then the following week, it was like, right, your turn. You need to take calls while somebody listened into me. And to put it in perspective, some of these calls are very lengthy, like 3 hours, and you can't go to the toilet whilst you're on the phone to them.
Oh
no. So you're in prep, you're hungry anyway. We all know that we drink more when we're in prep to help fill our stomachs and to generally help us feel less fucked. So you can't do that. So it was just, yeah, there were so many factors. I'm sitting down all day. I wasn't getting, even in the ambulance service when I was in the control room, I'd get up if I needed to speak to somebody in the control room, I'd get up, walk upstairs, speak to them. I wouldn't phone them. I'd physically move. Whereas this was like sat down all day. We got screen breaks in the ambulance service every 5 minutes. But again, if you're on the phone, you can't do that. You're stuck. So expenditure wise, I wasn't moving as much as I would have done in a previous prep. Sitting down a lot longer, not able to be hydrated as normal. I was literally pushing my food around these pools so that I had the cognition to be able to do them. But then, like, just literally nosedive through the pool. And I'd be there, like, sucking on bits of porridge because you can eat that without people hearing you on the other end of the phone. Last week, I basically completed the training portion for the role, and I sort of, we call approved by the DWP to assess people. So I passed the training effectively. And I just sat there and I was like, how did I get through that? You know, it did have an impact on the look. It was more tired body. My sleep went shit from about 8 weeks out. I was waking up at 1:30, 2 o'clock. I'm not a napping person. I think during prep I had probably about 3 or 4 naps. On show day, I know I've got a bit of a face now because I've actually got a dental infection. But on show day, my face was puffy because I was so sleep deprived. We had to do the Olympian meet and greet the night before the show. That started at 7. I then had my tan at 9. And then Dan had to go to Walmart to get some stuff. So I didn't get to sleep until, imagine not going to bed until 11 o'clock. And you're up at 5 for your makeup. Yeah. That's if you can sleep that long. And like the Saturday after the show, my face has come right in because I actually slept that night. It was, yeah.
It's really hard.
It was a lot. It's the hardest.
Yeah.
By far the hardest prep I've ever done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Was it the hardest you've done?
Mentally and physically. But I think mentally, I'm never really food focused on prep. I'm not one of these people that scrolls through Instagram thinking, I want to eat that, I want to eat this. It wasn't the food. It was the fact that I had somebody telling me what to eat every meal, every day, 6 weeks. You know, in off season, yeah, we have a meal plan structure. But if I want a little bit extra when we're at and I want a cake, I have it. If I want to have some, like, I don't know, extra bits of chocolate, I'll have it. It's not as restrictive, obviously. So it's more that mental, like, I don't even want that, but I want the opportunity to say no to that because I want to say no, not because I have to say no. Those sorts of things.
Yeah, for sure. And this was your first prep with Dan coaching you, wasn't it?
Yes. If anyone else had have coached me, I would have pulled out of it because Oh, he could. There's always that battle in prep for me personally. When I give feedback to a coach saying I am fucked, I don't say I'm fucked unless I am literally fucked. I'm not. I don't tend to moan about it. Give me an hour and a half, 2 hours cardio, I'll do it. Give me dust, I'll eat it. But there was one Friday morning I woke up and like all my lines had gone, everything. I was just puffy. I couldn't grip my forearms, my watch was tight. I was so full of inflammation that, and this was, I think it was 6 weeks out, splits in my legs had just gone, vascularity gone. I was so inflamed. And from that point, we were like, right, we need to catch your recovery feedback that you need a rest before it gets to that point. So Dan could see when I was saying, I am fucked, I can't train today. He could see that actually, well, you did all this the days before. So you're not just saying that because you're a little bit hungry and a little bit tired. You're proper fucked. So it worked really well for my head that way. There was no fucking around taking photos. Yeah, we did videos occasionally, but it wasn't every single check-in. You know, I could check in the kitchen with shitty lighting and he could see it.
Yeah.
There wasn't all those other stress factors. There's also like, he knows my head, he knows my body, he knows how my mind works. And yeah, I just think anyone else, I would have been like, fuck this, I don't care what it is, I'm not doing it. Because of the added stress of all those other factors.
Yeah, for sure. Because I do feel like a lot of bodybuilding couples sort of are going down this route. Like you see sort of people start coaching each other. And like you just said there, because I coach Matt, it's like I'd always have him in the same room and I just look at his physique. And we do, like you say, some photos and videos and what have you. But it's almost like a fluid check-in. And I make all this food and stuff, you see. So I just make it and I know, you know, what he's having and whatever. And it's really easy. Like, I don't know. It's I think sometimes it can be over complicated, but it can be so much more streamlined because you're just like, well, I know exactly what you're doing every single day because we're together, you know.
And I mean, I still have my sheets like I would as any other client.
Yeah.
We have a coaching chat WhatsApp group. So it sounds silly, but I was so fucked on that prep that I would literally, how much, you know, peak week, how much salt am I having with meal one? And I'd be there with a salt grinder and he'd tell me and I'm like, can you WhatsApp it to me? I can't remember. I was literally, my brain fell out my ass. Yeah. So to save sort of scrolling back through all the other, you know, can you get me X from Sainsbury's? Where are you with the dog? You know, all that other than inane chat in our normal WhatsApp group. We have the coaching chat, video, weight, any feedback, any changes, it goes on that chat, and then it's separate from our just normal day-to-day dribble that we talk. The various that get sent back and forward, that sort of thing.
Also, there's already a level of trust, right? I mean, you and Dan, you know, you're very close. You've got a tight-knit relationship from what I can see from an outsider's point of view. And we've spoken about it a little bit on the last pod. And, you know, who better, like you said, to trust? Like, he literally wants the absolute best for you. And I'm not saying other coaches wouldn't, but it's like, if you are in a fucking mental head warp, it's like, you can't question that he wants the best for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know, there is that line between how much do you divulge to a coach about out of life, the rest of your life experiences. Like, I think saying to somebody, I'm off sick work with anxiety, I've just been diagnosed with PTSD, I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating. That was like the level of detail I went into with Tom, for example. But Dan's there, he's seeing it. He's seeing the effect it's having on me. He's seeing when I'm training and my neck's tight because I've had a particularly anxious day and I'm struggling to like feel like I'm catching my breath. So maybe the session isn't as productive. I don't have to then try and put that into words and explain it in a feedback sheet. He's there, he's seen it. Likewise, you know, he can see when on prep I'm going hypo post cardio. I mean, there was one morning I had 3 in a row, stupidly. Yeah.
I've only had,
and it was like, I went hypo once. I had a half, what was it, about 18 grams of protein, carried on, had another one, finished the other half of protein. This is how fucked I was. I wasn't even thinking, you've just gone hypo twice. That's going to have a knock-on effect all day. what are you doing? And I'm in the gym. I mean, it's just literally a stone's throw over there, but I'm still in there on my own going hypo. And it's just like, I didn't even think as a clinician going, you should probably stop now after the first one. I was like, nope, I'm going to keep going. That was
I
a tough
laugh
day.
because it is.
That was one of the days where I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah, and it's funny
So
for us to sort of talk about it, isn't it? Because it's like you're literally a lot of bodybuilders, like we're of a certain nature when you sort of you're really pushing the sport, etc., and you gain success in the sport. We're absolute lunatics on the face of it, but I feel like we think it's quite normal, you know? It's like, no, well, I've had a
yeah,
hypo, see if I get another one. It's like a normal person would be like, what?
yeah, yeah. I know. It's like, I mean, I've gone hypo post training because you're waiting for your chicken to cook. That's to me, that's different.
Yeah,
That's a timing error.
yeah,
This was literally a lack of cognition and that drive to keep pushing. And I said to Dan at the beginning of the prep, I don't need anyone to tell me to work harder, to tell me to do more cardio, to tell me to get out of bed and do it. I need somebody to go, actually, you've done enough, stop. You need to rest now. Yeah. So it was like, there were a couple of precautions where we had to have like 2 back-to-back rest days and high days.
yeah.
And Dan was just like, we did our first podcast since the O that we're gonna put up at some point when he gets around to it. But he talks about how it was the hardest unresponsive body he's ever prepped. And normally I get lean like that. But it was just like, you think down regulation of hormones, down regulation of thyroid, fatigue mentally and physically, everything hurt. Like I'd roll over in bed and my ribs hurt. Like it was that inflammation you get from just your neurons and your nerve endings just being fucked. Yeah, it was hard.
And it is like, I guess there's levels to this, right? Because you pushing to go to the Olympia, like I touched on earlier, that's elite level for our sport. And I think there's an element of different types of competitors as well. And I'm sure you'll be of a similar mindset in regards to what we're trying to get from this sport. And I do believe if you're pushing to the extremes of, trying to qualify for the O, pushing for pro cards, competing internationally, all of these things, there's a level of almost like you need to be a little bit unhinged because it is not normal. But
Yeah, no,
I guess it's like trying to find that, like, I'm probably going to be very similar to you in regards to I can dig myself into a hole very easily, and then I'll just keep digging. How much lower can we go? And it like I say, it's not normal. I guess we could sort of touch on how you keep that at bay, other than having a coach, of course, for you with Dan, but previously when you work with other coaches that aren't as sort of close to you, etc. Do you know that you're doing it, or do you look back on a prep and go, fucking hell, I really fucked myself there?
so 2020 prep for my pro card win, it was lockdown. So limited options with what I could do cardio wise. So I'd fuck off on my bike for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think I had bagels thins in my diet. So I'd take a bagel thin with me and I was literally cycling around. And I don't think Rob knew quite how far because I was coached by Rob Allaruff at that point. I don't know if he knew quite how, I can't remember if I told him, but I think in my head that journey will take an hour.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And then not realize how hilly it was until I was on it, and it would take 2 hours.
Yeah.
So then he'd be like, "Oh, hi, Dave."
Yeah.
But then I think that's, when you are reaching that back end of prep, if your coach isn't getting you to check in more frequently, then there is that potential to properly put yourself in a hole. And that's why you need that external oversight. And I mean, hats off to people that can prep themselves. I know Rob Cannon prepped himself for Romanian Muscle Fest, and he looked fucking sick. How? I would just be emaciated because I would think, I'm not lean enough. I'm not lean enough. I need to dig more. I need to dig more. And then before I know it, I fucked off all my muscle.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyone that can do it themselves, my God, just phenomenal. I couldn't. And even Dan talked about, he was like, oh, maybe you could coach me. And I'm like, no, just no, not doing it. No. I mean, I don't, I'm still quite young in the coaching industry as far as coaching clients myself. And currently all my clients are females. And, the biggest competitor is amateur WPD. Very, very different kettle of fish to a very established super heavyweight with a long history of bodybuilding. It's just like, plus also when I tell him something like on the last prep where I'm like, yeah, you're looking sick, he's like, no, I'm not. So it's like, you don't listen to me, so how can I coach you?
For sure, for sure. Did you feel when you were digging in this last prep for the O, was there a knock-on effect with your relationship at all? If you're happy to talk about that, you know, like getting short with each other, things like this.
I mean, it's difficult to know. I know when I'm tired, if I am triggered by my anxiety or PTSD symptoms, I find it harder to rationalize, self-soothe, and not have those little outbursts. I am so lucky that Dan understands that it's not me being a dick. I can't help it. That doesn't make an excuse.
Yeah.
And what will often happen is something might trigger me to snap a little bit. It's never really like, I'm never telling him to fuck off. I'm never calling him names. It's like, can you please just help me with the washing? It was stuff like, I can't do everything.
Yeah.
And it would kind of, I'd burst a little bit and then calm down a bit. I'd have a think about it. And it would be like, actually, that happened because of this. And yeah, I shouldn't have reacted that way. But I was also feeling this, you know, I was feeling anxious because of, I've got an assessment coming up. I haven't slept since 2 a.m. I can't rationalize that actually I can just have a normal conversation with you. And we'd have that kind of, it's almost like what we used to do in work, a sort of debrief a little while afterwards, where I'd be like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have reacted like that, but can you see why this happened?
Yeah.
Or like, it's that sort of thing. So we've never, touched wood, it's never kind of caused a full-on row. There was one day when we were both on prep back, I think he was a week out from his show, week out from the uni, and certain compounds had gone in with him that, like Halo, for example, that had kind of made him close up a bit. Yeah. And I'm in prep, full of fucking anxiety, going, why aren't you talking to me? Why are you just sitting in the office all day? Yeah. Why? Because that's all he did. He would sit in the office, work, eat his food, watch his YouTube and work. And I'd not see so much of him for a couple of weeks. And it just got to this point where I then started shutting down a bit. So he's then going, well, why is she being quiet with me? Why isn't she talking to me? We're both thinking the same thing. But because we were so fucked, we didn't have that capacity to kind of go, something's misaligned here. What's going on? Yeah. And then when we actually had the conversation, it was like, oh, we've both just been being dickheads. But there was a little, that's probably the closest we've come to having a row. Was we were in the gym and I was like, I'm fucking going home. Storming out, was like, we'll talk about it when we get home. And that was our kind of blowout to it. And then it was like, so why is this happening? It was so many factors that precipitated to that. But yeah, on prep, I know I get quiet. I know I get less affectionate. I get colder. Everything that you experience because you are just tired, it's all a circumstance of prep. And I'm lucky that, you know, Dan's been through it multiple times himself. So he understands. And it would be just like, I remember having a conversation with him. It was actually after the A, like after I'd been on pre-judging. And so pre-judging was in the expo. So imagine FitX times 10. That was the environment that you're then having to walk through after you've been on stage. So there's all this noise, there's all these people. We got back to our hotel room and I was like, I think he tried to give me a hug once we got out of the expo, and I was just like, I just can't. And I had to sit down and explain to him. I was like, when I'm overstimulated, yeah, physical touch, even like from somebody I love, it just makes me feel claustrophobic. And I hate saying that, but it's just because the noise, the lights, the lack of sleep, I'm just completely overstimulated. Yeah, it was fucking just people bashing into you when you're depleted, yeah, tired. It's not fun.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because
the stage itself was amazing.
Yeah, like you sort of, I think probably if I think back to my first few preps, I was so bloody excited that I was like, whoa, I'm a bodybuilder and oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. But when you start to, you know, you really commit to the sport and you start doing well, etc., and something like going to the Olympia, I imagine we could talk about the pressures in the prep for it being for that. But it's like, actually, that level of stimulation, it actually doesn't lend itself like it would have if you were like a newbie and you're like, wow, this is really good. There's definitely a change in dynamic, isn't there?
Yeah. And then you factor in the fact that, like I said, we had to meet the Olympians the night before, which was like being in a rave from 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock. Lights, noise, people, having to interact with like fans. Most of the fans were mates that we knew from the UK that came up and spoke to us. Like Nathan Stiles and Phoebe were out there, and Bulmer and various other people. So they were all coming. We looked really popular. There's just literally me sat on a table with my name. All like most of the other WPD athletes have got like kind of key rings or postcards or some sort of like little kind of thing for the fans, and I'm just sat there like, we were so underprepared for this. I've got Miss Olympia sat behind me with a big off fuck off banner, and it's just literally me and Dan at a table kind of going, can we go home yet? Can we go sit in the quiet now, please? Yeah, it was something I hadn't, that aspect of it and that interaction with fans. It kind of happened after Toronto, and it was just something that it didn't factor. Everyone's thinking about, oh yeah, I'd love to win. I'm like, I'd like to be top 5.
Yeah.
But then you don't actually think what happens after that. And after 𝗵𝗃 being pulled for an interview and then being unable to leave the building because people are wanting to take photos, it was just like, this is mental. I can't, like, and Instagram's going off with various DMs and reshares and all that sort of thing. It was just an aspect that I hadn't anticipated. I was more prepared for it by the time we got to the O. I just didn't have the energy or the brain function to do it.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a prep vibe, isn't it? And actually, a question just popped into my head. When you look at your stage shots and, you know, when you've competed, whichever show, of course, the Olympia being like this pinnacle event, do you look and go, fucking hell, that's me? Do you still have a bit of like that? Do you ever have like an undercurrent of body dysmorphia, or like, is that really me?
I'm beginning to realize how wide I am.
Okay.
Only now. I've got to a point where I now have to have 2 pillows when I sleep, because otherwise my neck's like this, which I've never had to have before. I've got quite a thick pillow anyway, but I've now had to bolster it with another pillow. And we were actually in Sainsbury's last night, and it was like a normal size jumper for me, not an oversized one. Normally I wear Dan's, but it was actually just a normal size jumper. And I'm stood next to this dude and got whatever I needed off the shelf, waddled on, and Dan's kind of gone to me. He's just giggling, and I'm like, "What are you giggling?" He's like, "You made that man look like he was 5. You were so wide, stood next to him." And it's like, I don't appreciate it. And going into London again, little gaps that I used to be able to sneak through when I was like just CrossFitting 15 years ago, I can't get in now. And there's always like, I always used to stand at this certain point in the tube where you could get a bit of space if you were small. Can't fit in it anymore. Like, it's just sitting on a tube seat, sitting on a plane seat like this.
Yeah,
I don't class it as body dysmorphia because it doesn't cause me any kind of negative symptoms. I just wander around thinking that I'm still a size 8 when I'm not. Not in a like, oh my God, I'm small. Just like, well, this is me. I'm that size. And it's not until I try and wear clothes or sleeping in bed or, like I say, sitting on the tube that I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm not a size 8 anymore. Oh, when did that happen?
Yeah. With the sleep, so when we touched base about doing the pod, you said you'd be happy to talk about that. And actually, I've spoken a little bit more on the pod about the effects of like sleep apnea as you push up in body weight. Is that something you've ever come across, or with Dan? I don't know.
So Dan, before we met, he had a CPAP machine for sleep apnea. Since we've met, I've done a lot with his positioning in bed. Like, he was sleeping on a pillow that again was too shallow for him. So we've got these, I need to get some for myself now as well. There's these foam blocks that in off season go under his pillow, under the sheet, so that it boosts him up a little bit more. And that seems, I've not noticed him having any sleep apnea.
Wow.
I don't think I have sleep apnea, but this dental infection, I cracked my tooth. I had a toothache this side leading up to the show. That self-resolved. the day after the show, eating bacon, I cracked a tooth back here. So also being on prep, I had 3 courses of antibiotics before the show, and I've had another 2 courses of antibiotics since the show. No, it is 3 because I started them the day after actually. So it's been like 2 months more or less more of antibiotics. And that did reflect in the look. They do make my GI descend quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm snuffly at sleep at the moment because I'm so congested from this tooth issue. It's like it's gone to my sinuses, and I'm just like, ooh. So Dan's had to wear earplugs because apparently I've been snoring.
It is a thing with, you know, being heavily muscled that there are people don't see it. Like, you know, from an outsider's point of view, would you even think of that if you see someone that's heavily muscled? You just think, wow, that person's got a lot of muscle. But, you know, there is a lot of things, and I'm sure you're going to be considering them as you move through your off season, potentially how far you're going to push that in regards to the certain things that start to have a knock-on effect, general fitness, etc., etc.
So with weight on your chest, it doesn't matter whether that's fat or muscle. It's the weight on the chest, it's the muscles around your neck. It can be even how thick your back is and that position that your head is in when you're asleep. All these things can cause issues with sleep apnea. It is something like my top line is something we need to bring up. So, you know, pecs, that's going to be more weight on my chest. So, you know, if it does get to the point where my sleep is affected from sleep apnea, that might be something that I have to consider. God knows how I'm going to head around that, but I have to, because these have links with, you know, early death, cardiac disease, all sorts of nasty stuff that you don't want to have to worry about. So it is better to utilize the CPAP machine to prevent anything in the future and actually aid your recovery, because that was something where my sleep went to shit. Definitely not sleep apnea, because I wasn't heavy enough for it. My recovery then became harder. I'm getting softer. I'm retaining more water because you're just not getting that recovery period that you need. I've never had a prep like it. You know, normally prep, wake up at 4 a.m. I can deal with that.
Yeah.
Waking up at 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then that's you for the whole day. That was, and then there's that fear of, am I going to sleep tonight? Am I going to sleep tonight? And it was just happening towards the last month. I think every day, if I slept till 2:30, 3 o'clock, then that was a good morning. It was, yeah, tough.
Has your sleep returned to a more normal? Because we said when we messaged, didn't we? Some mornings you're still getting up at like 5, but if you can sleep in a bit, you are at the moment. Are you just sort of taking each day as it comes?
Basically, yeah. Like, I mean, I set for work, I normally get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock because I train before work anyway. So part of it, I don't know if part of it is just that routine of the days during the week that I wake up that early. I think I had the first week we were back and I wasn't training, I was sleeping longer. And then I think I went back into it too hard, stupidly. So recovery does, if I've overtrained, it will impact my sleep, and it's then like a vicious cycle. And then getting ill with this infection, that kept waking me up because I was snoring. That wakes me up as well. My own snoring, or like, you know, when you're breathing through your mouth and your mouth's all dry, like, that sort of thing. Now it's like I put my alarm on for 6 this morning, and I still wake up at 4:30. But I'm tossing and turning less, so I'm sleeping. My quality of sleep during those times is getting better. But I did try and taper off all the sleep aids I was using during prep too soon, I think. And then I got ill and it just got worse from there. So I've kind of gone back up to a not as high a level of sleep aids, but I'm still using them to kind of get over this infection. And then I'll probably try tapering off them once I've kind of established a bit of baseline recovery in the new year. But it's like, you can't, it's something I've been talking about with one of the other competitors at the O. It's like, you look after post show, you see all these competitors that you were with on stage who 2 days later are back in the gym, like beasting themselves. And then there's this pressure of, I can't do that yet. I don't feel ready to do that yet. But should I be doing that yet? Am I missing out on the rebound? Am I missing out on time? Am I missing out on growing? And it's like, actually, you need to consider what your body needs and not worry about what everyone else needs.
Yeah.
It's taken me, I think it was about a month after I started training sort of nearer a 90% than the sort of 70% I was doing in my sessions leading up to that point. And I did put myself in a bit of a hole. It was too early and I had to have a week off because I got ill. This week, I've gone back in at about 85% and it feels a lot better. So it's like that's now been established to be able to push up from there. But it's every prep's going to be different. Sometimes you can get back in the gym straight away. Sometimes you can't. Some people can every time. Some people need weeks or months off, whether that's physically or mentally. But it is a hard thing to get your head around when you're like, but my competitor is in there doing it. I should be.
Yeah, for sure. I think that what you've just said there is, well, I know it's so relevant in regards to individual response, also coinciding that with comparison on social media. But, you know, with what you've spoken about there with recovery, etc., it's certainly more on the peripheral now, like a lot more influencers and people that we hear on podcasts, etc., are talking about it and actually giving personal anecdote to my physique didn't look so good when I competed because there was, you know, stress management issues and recovery, etc., etc. And it's super cool because for me, I've always thought more is better. And similar to you, I've had to rewrite that in my brain, but sometimes I still find myself, you know, dipping into these old habits. You touched on that earlier, like you're doing it and you don't even realize you're doing it. And then you're like, I didn't even know I was doing that. But as bodybuilders, we get into these like rituals almost, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the biggest thing I think I spoke about before with when Dan took over my training, he completely decreased my volume that I was doing. And it's the most I've ever grown. So more isn't always better. If you can't recover from it, then all you're doing is digging yourself a hole. Yeah. And it's something we had a conversation about at the beginning of the week. He was like, you know, with your training at the moment, you are going to have to decrease volume. That doesn't mean you train any less intense during that set, but maybe we do slightly less sets or slightly less exercises and have more rest days. And actually, we've come to a balance where I'm still training 5 days a week, but one of those days is an arm day.
Yeah.
So it's not as physically taxing on recovery. It's more mentally taxing because I've never had an arm day before, and learning the sort of mind muscle connections with them can be, the first time I think we done 3 sets of biceps, 1 set of tricep, and I was like, I'm fucked. My brain is fucked from the concentration of trying to, because I've always struggled to engage with my arms and actually feel it where I'm meant to. So the session was more about that. And I was just like, he was like, we did another 2 sets of triceps. And he was like, oh, should we do another one? I was like, done. I am done.
I love that actually you've spoken about basically like a specialization block, and it's something certainly that, you know, if you can get a coach that knows their stuff, and ideally, you know, you work with a coach for a long period of time. If you can, Dan already knew your body and sort of almost fast track that bit. So that's ideal for you two as a coaching partnership. But when you start going into specialization blocks and you start working on the intention, like it's amazing how much your load needs to change as well. But it's essentially that's progressive overload as well, isn't it? Because you're doing something. You've done arms your whole time as a competitor, right?
Arms was always tagged on the end of a session.
Yeah.
And when we were down in Exeter and we were training in like the public gym, I would run out of time because people would start talking to me and I had to go to work or go do whatever I needed to do. So they'd be, oh, I'll do them tomorrow. And tomorrow never really, occasionally it would come. And then when I started prep doing morning cardio, I started doing arms. But I had the time then because I was off work. This prep, I didn't have the time. Literally, I unfortunately, my posing got neglected slightly because I didn't have the time, because every moment was filling in with steps or work or meal prepping for the next day so that that day would run smoothly. So it's definitely something we've taken right. Can't take it on the end of a session. If I feel I have the capacity, I'll put it in the middle of a session as a top up from my arm day. But it was some of the feedback was a bit more bicep, which we knew already. We knew from the beginning of the year, but it just wasn't the time to implement an arm specific day when you're on prep. Like there's other things that need to take priority. But it's definitely a focus for the off season.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like a different tangent. I think that, you know, yes, we can be robots and that's cool. But actually sometimes we're not saying here, okay, so every month we're going to change the training block and we're going to do something different, because we both know, I'm sure, Romana, that that's not the way. But doing something, you know, it fits in with what you're doing already, and then you're using your judges' feedback to actually reprogram and favor the feedback, but also have that like novel stimulus and have a new focus within what you'd be doing anyway, per se. And I certainly feel, you know, it aids the progression as a athlete when you're in this for the long haul, because you don't have to fuck around with everything. But it's quite nice to do something a bit different in an off season, isn't it?
Well, there's that, and something that Dan probably hates it, but something I've wanted to add back into my back day is actually some hang cleans from the CrossFit days.
Nice.
My back, my triceps were built, not my triceps, my traps were built from doing CrossFit, from that shrugging motion of doing a hang clean. So it's like they're fun, it's something different, it's explosive power, and it's still going to work on the areas that I want to target. Does it mean that I'm going to start doing full Olympic clean and jerk lifting? No, but that specific portion of the lift I know works really well for me and I enjoy it. So let's put it in an off-season environment and see what happens.
Yeah, off season's almost like experimenting. The more you do as well, like we know the basics of an off season, and then we have judges' feedback. But it's like, why the fuck not? Why not put something in there? I'm like, God, it's sick today. I'm going to do that, and it's something away from, like, you know, maybe being institutionalized in a prep as well. Because, you know, mentally, yes, again, we can be robots, but sometimes it does take the stuffing out of you when you do a prep like you have, and you're
Yeah.
just like, I'm so fucked. So doing something a little bit different, it's like, well, I'm gonna go and have a bit of fun at the gym as well. Do something a little bit different away from like what we have to do to be optimal.
Yeah. And it is, you know, it is an intense movement when you're cycling the reps.
Yeah.
It gasses you. So there's that element of slightly higher intensity with explosive power as well as strength all at the same time. So yeah, we'll see what happens with it, how long it lasts for. My lower back's been a bit of a pain in the ass the last few days. So that's not from that movement. That's just my old back. But it's
Yeah.
like we had other goals initially as well, which were to get strong in barbell rowing and get strong at RDLing. It's something that actually I need to, for my body, realize that an RDL, yeah, I can perform it, but if I start pushing the weight, that's when I start having problems, and that impacts the other sessions. So just to be able to say I can RDL X, Y, and Z weight is great, but it's actually not going to help my progression overall.
Yeah, I have to agree with RDLs. Fucking love them, but my body does not love them for a few days after because of chronic back pain. And it's a fucker because it's like, oh, I just love that movement. But you've got to be smart, right? Because longevity in the sport,
Yeah.
we're putting ourselves through a lot. If you do, you know, prep after prep and off season after off season, and for yourself, I'm sure you've got goals in mind as to what you want to do in this off season. But maybe we could talk a bit about where you feel like that's going to head before you would prep again.
So it all kind of depends on when the calendar comes out for next year. Initially, it was have 2024 off and not compete again until 2025. And part of me is like, as nice as that sounded during prep when I was depleted, in reality, my appetite's probably going to come to a ceiling relatively quickly. It always does. So is a year-long off season actually going to be productive? Probably not. Can I get more, can I get just as much productivity out of a shorter off season? And actually, we know from my feedback and the fact that I even qualified for the Olympia that it's more about refinements to the physique now. Yeah, there's more sizes like form figure to WPD, where I did have to kind of put on a significant amount of size. So we think that we can do a decent amount of progress. And then once we get the calendar dates, then it will be it'll be the back end of the year somewhere, but I'm not sure until the calendar's released. Probably be a European show and an American show. But it's like it's timing them so that you're not on prep for too long, but also allowing time for, say, I don't qualify in the first, I don't qualify in the second. Is there space logistically? Is it possible to go to another place to compete a third time to see if I can get that qualification? There's so many different factors.
Yeah. And do you, with this prep being as hard as it was, now, of course, you've got PTSD from things that we've already spoken about. Do you feel like there's any elements of like PTSD type feelings from the prep you've just done? Because I think that that's quite a good question.
No, I think for me, perspective wise, putting myself in a calorie deficit for a show is never going to be triggering in that way, because that's a choice I've made to do that. And I appreciate that, yeah, some people do end up with trauma from doing a prep. But then I also think maybe they need to sort of sit down and say to themselves, is this something that I can do? Is this not just physically healthy for me, but psychologically? And I think if you're coming out at the back end of the prep with those kind of symptoms, then maybe you need to be having that conversation with yourself. Is this the best for me? And some people may disagree with that. That's just coming from my perspective. If I could have avoided putting myself in those situations, I mean, some may argue, well, you decided to become a paramedic, so you knew that you were going to see X, Y, and Z, but nobody can prepare you for 18 years worth of seeing different shit. Like, and it's all luck of the draw. I went years without necessarily going to anything horrific, but it's also the emotional pull of that. But yeah, as far as this prep, there are elements of it that did sort of stress me out. My biggest stress of it all was the worry that my body wasn't going to respond in the way that it would do, and that would reflect badly on Dan, rather than the consideration of the circumstances we faced. And that was something that I was like, I didn't want him to feel responsible, because I knew it wasn't him. It was just the fact that my body and mind were tired.
That's quite hard, isn't it? Because it's, again, we
Yeah.
love each other, so it's like, and I guess as well, earlier you said about, you know, it gets harder to not be intimate per se as, you know, the sex route, but just that like closeness in day-to-day life. I can certainly relate to that with, you know, there was a couple of times with Matt where I'd be hugging him and I'm thinking, I'm literally like not here. I'm just
Yeah.
it's like the action of a hug, and that can be quite hard for people to build back up. Now, we've done it several times, so we sort of, I guess, know to expect that per se, and Dan knows, and Matt now knows because it was our first prep together. But is there any advice that you would give to people that have clocked that actually, you know, I was probably a bit of a dick, or, you know, I didn't behave appropriately? Now, you've touched on how you recognize it and do it. If there's like a first timer listening and they think, how do I reconcile a relationship that I've potentially, you know, I've changed the dynamic and I have been a bit of a dick?
I think self-reflection, acknowledgement of, not, I don't like the term what went wrong or what you did wrong or how you behaved badly, but take yourself away in those moments if you are feeling elevated in any sort of emotion, whether that's stress, anxiety, anger. Taking yourself away and actually having a think, why am I feeling like this? Is it actually because they've pissed me off, or they've done something that's made me feel like this? Or is it because I'm hungry, because I'm tired, because I'm trying to do too much? And being honest with yourself. And if it is you, the easiest way to reconcile, I feel, in that situation with your partner is to be like, I'm really sorry I was a dick. I really didn't mean it. And then opening up that avenue of conversation of, I felt like this. I know it's not you, but this is how I felt. And then the onus isn't on, you made me feel like this. Yeah. It's more about, this is how I felt in the moment. And I reacted poorly. And this is why I reacted poorly. I was feeling overstretched. I was hungry. And then you did something that made me feel like, or this happened and it made me feel like. It's opening that communication rather than bottling it all up. And it can take a lot to kind of sit with yourself and be like, why did I behave like that? But the only thing that's going to come out of it is growth, because you're acknowledging what might have happened. And then if the situation arises again, before you react, taking those moments of, like, I'll kind of go to the loo and I may not even need to pee, but I'll sit there and I'm like, why am I feeling like this? Yeah, it sounds stupid, but then having that moment away to kind of decompress allows me to then go back in and go, do you know what? I'm really struggling. I can't do it all. I can't work 8:30 till 5. I can't do all the washing. I can't unload the dishwasher, do my meal prep, do my steps, do my cardio, and train strength. I need some help. And that's a key thing as well, is communicating your needs within whatever the situation is. Are your needs being met? Yes or no? Well, how can that person know that you need something unless you tell them? Nobody's a mind reader.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that happens quite a lot in relationships, is the presumption that they should know that they're doing this. Well, that other person is also thinking about what they need to do, how they feel, whether the, I don't know, the dog needs letting out, whether they've got work or not. They've got a lot of things buzzing around in their head as well. But until you open up that communication and go, I need this from you, and saying the word need kind of, it personalizes it a bit more. It's not, I want you to do this, I need you to do this to help me. And I'm so lucky with Dan, because he is literally like, I mean, he moved us from Exeter to Suffolk on his own with a mate. He had to drive to Exeter and back twice within 2 weeks out. Once in an LGV, it took them 8 hours each way because they're limited to 50 miles an hour. Packed up the house, or the majority of it, and then I think it was 3 days later, went back in a van to finish it up because it wouldn't all fit in the HGV. And it's like he was, I will do anything to help you, but we need to be able to communicate together. And it's so key, so key. And I'm so lucky that I can have that with him. And even those moments where I am a little bit irate, he still listens with patience and doesn't react, thank God.
I always had this like assumption when I came away from being married to someone that was a non-bodybuilder, and when I became single, I was like, I don't think I could be with another bodybuilder that has been like I have been for my portion of being in quite a dark place, but bodybuilding was my funnel. It was like literally everything. So consequently, I became quite neurotic, etc. And I used to think I could not be with a male bodybuilder that's like that, because my assumption was, potentially there'd be ego, we'd be competing and everything else. And I thought, I don't know who I could be with. But there certainly is, like Matt and sounds like Dan, where, just because they look after their body as well, there is different types of bodybuilders for sure. But it's, I don't know if you ever had those thought processes about like, would I want to be with another competitor?
So until I met Dan, everyone I dated was a non-bodybuilder. They might go to the gym a couple of times a week. Some of them didn't even train. So I knew that actually that doesn't work, because when you're saying, I've got to go to bed early because I've got to do prep, I've got to do cardio tomorrow because I'm on prep, or even down to, I remember I was dating a guy around my pro debut time, and again, it was at the back end of prep, and I cancelled on him twice. It was both times they were after a 12-hour shift, and I was like, I'm so tired, I'm sorry, and they wanted me to drive an hour to where they lived, and at no point did they say, oh, if you're fucked, I'll come and see you. It wasn't an option. It was like, you've cancelled on me, how do you think that makes me feel? It's like, well, hang on a minute. To start off with, even if I wasn't on prep, I've still been up since like 5 a.m. because I started work at 6:30. Yeah. I've done a 12-hour shift, constantly interacting with people, just want to lie on the sofa and not move. Yeah. Whereas with Dan, he knows what it's like in those last moments of those last weeks of prep. He knows that if we're going to go anywhere, we're both doing our meal prep. And then at some point while we're out, we need to eat, or we can't go and do such and such because we need to train first. And it's, we've kind of done our training split, so we have Saturdays off together. Neither of us has work, neither of us trains, it's both a rest day. So that's our day together. So that's really important. But the rest of the week, we understand if one of us is knackered or one of us can't do something because of training. It just helps for me. I think some people, I see a lot more male bodybuilders with non-bodybuilding partners than I see female bodybuilders with non-bodybuilding partners. I don't know if that's the societal ego thing. From my experience, I always got, oh, you're stronger than me, oh, you've got bigger arms than me. And it's like, it's not a competition, and I work my ass off. Why are you considering that as a negative? You need to adjust. That's not a me problem, that's a you problem. You need to adjust that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But for me personally, it's got to be a competitor. And I knew that after sort of being single for quite a few years. I was like, not that I was searching for a bodybuilder, but I knew that I wanted somebody that they had to be serious in whatever they were pursuing if it was going to work.
Yeah, I feel like there's just that unspoken rules as well. It's a bit like friendship groups, isn't it? I mean, it not that I want to take away from friendships outside of bodybuilding that I have, but it is much easier. Like, you know, you do what you need to do and there's no one's going to ask you about it. And it's, yeah, it just flows. And the same in a relationship. Like, I don't need to tell Matt at this time I need to have my supplements, and then I start my bedtime routine. And like you've described, it's like it just happens because it's important to us. Like, physique development is our life. And I certainly feel like, I don't know if you felt it, similar to what you just said there, actually, with when it's someone non-bodybuilding, they sort of, oh, well, you could miss that tonight, couldn't you? Or like those, like, this is really fucking important to me. And now, once again, I'm trying to like find an excuse for why it's important. That can, of course, add an element of stress to a relationship, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. That you almost feel that, and I've had it even when I was CrossFitting and I wasn't as serious. I was in a relationship with somebody that was into their fitness, but it was like they got time to train when they were at work, and then they went and played football at the weekend. They didn't understand why after work I wanted to go to a CrossFit class and not just come home and sit on the sofa. It's like, well, you've trained during your time at work. He was a police officer, so he had that time. I don't have that luxury. So the only option I have is to go after work. Oh, you're always at CrossFit. Well, I'm not. It's just I work and then I want to go and do this thing 3 times a week. And then you're fucking off to play football at the weekend. So
yeah,
yeah.
for sure. And that sort of thing builds to resentment, right? And again, something very useful to talk about, because I've certainly felt that, you know, in the past I'd be doing things and then I'd feel like there was resentment from him, and then I'd be resenting him for resenting me. And then, you know, it went on for years, and then it was like, fucking hell, there's so much resentment here. And
yeah,
it takes its toll. And I don't know how you felt going into a relationship with Dan, but with Matt, I just thought, do you know what? I'm just going to have to make a clean slate of any like predisposed ideas of what this is going to be. And it's like, let's just see how it goes, being my authentic self with another bodybuilder and just go for it. And for me, it's been a night and day difference how I feel about having a partner and sharing my life. Are you the same?
So for me, I felt a lot of the people I dated in the past would project their insecurities either because they didn't have the motivation or the dedication to make their physique what they wanted it to be, or there was almost an element of jealousy that I had more muscle and could lift stronger than them. And it's like, again, I say it's a you problem, it's not a me problem. If you want to develop and grow with that, then yeah, I'll support you, I'll help you. We can have those conversations. But if you're not willing to be honest about why you've got this resentment underlying, then how do you expect me to help you with that? But equally, I'm not going to take your shit because you don't feel good about yourself. Because I really, really have an issue with people that project how they feel about themselves onto other people to make them feel bad. So just so that they can feel better as a person. And I was single for quite a long time before Dan and I got together. I think I'd had a brief, I was seeing somebody in the September 2021, and then Dan and I didn't properly sort of officially get together. Well, it was July. So it was quite, and I'd had sort of very simple, not very committed relationships for probably about, well, lockdown did that, you know, since probably about May 2019. I'd been sort of floating around as a single Pringle for the majority of the time. So I had that time to know and learn myself more and what I wanted. So when I met Dan, it was like the biggest thing for me was because he is a bigger person, I felt more feminine, which is really, really hard when you're walking around with more muscle. And it's things like I'd find myself, I'd cover up a lot when I was out in public because I didn't want the stares or the interaction. Whereas when Dan and I are together, it doesn't bother me so much. And I feel like I can be more myself because I'm more comfortable in my own skin. And I think that's really important in a relationship is that other person should compliment and bring out the best in you, not try and make you feel shit and suppress you. So yeah, it's like going to London. Dan didn't come with me. I went and met a friend, and I did feel quite self-conscious on the tube, where at one point I had a zip up on that's quite tight fitting, and like I can see people looking at me, and kids, they seem to be the worst. The amount of kids I've had like touch me, and their parents are right there, and I'm like, why are you allowing your child to touch a stranger on the tube? Like, that's not okay. I don't care how old they are. That's not okay. You can't just like, I was stood there and this child just ran its hand down my back, and it must have been about 7, and its parents were just there looking at it.
Right.
Didn't say a word. And I'm like, that's weird. That's a boundary that your child should be taught.
Yeah, yeah.
Personally,
Well,
there's the one with no children.
Yeah, but there's two sides to this coin, right? There's like people that are like, you know, the child needs to be in this box, and then you've got other people that the child's literally like, and there is boundaries as well. And also, you don't know, you know, for you, if you were at the spot where you were getting the diagnosis and stuff, that could have caused a lot of problems for you because someone is in your personal space. And I do agree with you. You know, it is for the parent to assess the surroundings because it could end very.
Also, I mean, you get all sorts of nutters on the tube.
Sure.
You know, quite severe mental health patients, drunk people. You have no idea how that person is going to react, and adults do it as well. Like, poke it. It's just like, stop. Just, I don't like being touched anyway, so it doesn't help. And luckily, I've got, you know, I've got the ability to control how I react to it. And if it's a child, I'll just scowl at it and make it kind of clear that way that I won't say anything, but I will frown at them and look at them, because I'm like, no, you can't just be touching strangers.
Yeah, I agree.
With adults, it's a bit like, oh, can I touch your biceps? No. Can I touch your eyeball?
Oh, it's really weird.
Yeah.
It happens so much, and I'm like I suppose like in foreign countries, like we went to Turkey and like these men were just like muscle man and like touching Matt, and I was like, you sort of let it off, like, because it's quite funny, but it's very, very common. And I remember actually from our last pod, I was telling my friend that we've met over in Thailand about us recording today, and I was like, Romana is such a legend. Like, honestly, the pod we did, and you know, just being able to talk with you, I really do look up to you in the sport and as a person.
Oh, thank you.
I mean that because I rarely meet people that, you know, it's like you just catch a really good vibe. And of course, you're giving your time to help me spread a message on the podcast. And I was describing to him and I said, you spoke about where you got people shouting at you on the street about like muscle women and stuff. And I said to him, I was like, I'm sorry, but I know I'm into physique development, but who the fuck in their right mind has a go at someone for having muscle? Like, makes no sense to me. It makes no sense.
It's weird because this year we've gone to Canada, we've gone to Spain, we've gone to Florida, and various different places around England. And something that we both found really refreshing was the reaction to our muscle mass in Canada. There was nothing but compliments. There was no touching. There was just like, oh my God, you look amazing. There was no, you're lucky to look like that. It was just like, oh wow, your arms are amazing. It was that sort of thing. Yeah. Whereas in the UK, yeah, you do get compliments, but you also get the, oh, I wouldn't want to look like you. Like the amount of women that have said, oh, I don't want to end up looking like you. In fact, one of my clients, her partner said to her, I don't want you ending up looking like your coach. And it's like, this doesn't accidentally happen. And actually, to tell somebody, I don't want you to look a certain way, that again goes back to their own insecurities and suppression. And yeah, just not cool.
I remember we spoke about what your mum's thoughts about, like,
yeah.
And my mum was the same. She was like, oh, I don't want you to look like, you know, like not feminine or bigger muscles and stuff like that. And I said, Mum, look, the people you're looking at, you know, that takes years. And of course, there's PD and everything else. And she understands it now. And I guess from her point of view, it was like, she's thinking like a little girl's going to turn into like, you know, heavily muscled woman. But as you just said there, you know, I mean, for me, the investment in time and you pursuing that, it's fucking incredible. And it's really hard that people are so short-sighted. And like you touched on there, why is someone's boyfriend saying, I want you to look like that? I'd be like, well, fuck off then.
It's like, would you say the same thing if your partner decided to change their hair color? You might say, it looks nice, but I preferred you with X color hair. You wouldn't say, I don't want you to, or no partner should be telling their partner what color to dye their hair or what clothes to wear, or, you know, it's those sorts of things, that underhand sort of psychological control, and it can snowball. But yeah, it's just people.
It's
But
very hard.
I tried, I actually, speaking of mums, I tried showing her, it wasn't anything in a bikini. It was just me in my jogging bottoms and a bra top, a video of me posing. And to try and show her that, you know, there is an element of kind of gracefulness to this. And she was still like, what are you trying to do there? Show off all your muscles.
Yeah. Very different era, of course, as well. But we are, you know, part of such a small percentage, and you yourself being in the categories that require the more muscle mass, like even less of a percentage, because, you know, bikini and that realm that I'm in, you know, there is, in the UK especially, there's so many federations and so many like versions of bikini. Like, I lose track. There's, you know, into diva, etc., and everything else, whereas you're in such a niche position, so you've got to work even more to get that physique as well. And it is very, very tricky if someone questions that. And I'm guessing that Dan sort of keeps you in the bubble if you do face these.
Yeah. Oh, if anyone said anything with him around, nobody has as yet. But if anyone said anything with him around, I pity them. I mean, he's not at all an aggressive person, but he would lose his shit, and he would be very cutting with like, what do you think gives you the right to say that? But
Like,
it's like all these different factors as a woman walking around with more muscle, people don't consider. It is this like, it is more difficult to feel feminine. It's like I had to buy some like new knickers and trying to find any that actually don't give me a wedgie. Can't wear bras, sports, like even extra large sports bras, like lats or stomach, they're like crushing. And wear Dan's clothes most of the time. And that in itself, you don't feel feminine when you're wearing an oversized t-shirt. But it's because, like, even this is like a triple X or something like that from Nightdown.
yeah.
It is so hard to find clothing that allows you to feel how you want to feel when you're walking around. Like, I can't remember the last time I wore jeans.
Yeah, I don't even like jeans.
No. So I've still got some dresses that will fit, that I tend to wear if I'm wearing normal people clothes, because it is about that feeling feminine, not always wanting to wander around in jogging bottoms, but it is hard.
I reckon you look sick in a dress. Like, I literally, I love physique development so much. Like, I look at your, you know, physique and I just think, wow, because of course I know how much work goes into it as well. And it certainly is, you know, the mental health side of things for yourself, all of that, you know, pressure around that sort of external side of things as well, and what that can bring in itself, let alone then, of course, going to competition. And I said to you earlier, I'd like to pick your brains about the pressure that maybe was that higher when you were going to the O, or were you quite cool about that?
So the most pressure I felt leading into a show was 𝗵𝗽𝗆,
Okay.
because having come second at Toronto, there was all these what if, and even I think I said to you in the last podcast, even standing on the diagonals when they called fourth, fifth, fourth, third, second, and the woman next to me was like going, you've won," and I'm like, no. You can see me if you watch the video. I'm like, no. And then they called my name. But going to the O, as far as pressure, it wasn't. I felt no pressure about the placings. I would have liked to have come top 10, but there were several factors into why. I mean, when I first came out, I'm with the two previous Miss Olympias. I've got a top 5 Olympian and a top 10 Olympian. That was the first time the judges saw me. So I'm stood next to Sarah Villas on one side. I've got Emily Schubert on the other side. Then you've got Natalia one down and Brooke Wells on the end. And they're all like phenomenal physiques. So yeah, when the judges first look at me, I'm compared to, you know, this high level of Olympian. There was that factor. There was the factor that I couldn't remember the instructions Dan had given me. I didn't even think to check my phone to recheck the instructions he'd given me. I was that, like, literally, it was in one ear, out the other, gone. He had no Wi-Fi, so he couldn't communicate anything to me backstage. Coaches weren't allowed backstage. They told us to start pumping up 40 minutes before they should have done. So I've now lost my pump. And part of forgetting the instruction was we use a little bit of pineapple pre-stage as a little bit of a sugar boost. I'd forgotten that he said to me, right, have a bit of pineapple. If you need anything more, have squares bars. So I just kept all I remembered was pineapple. So I just kept eating pineapple. And if you've ever eaten too much fructose, what's going to happen? Lower GI distension, and you're going to need to run to the toilet. And literally between going out alphabetically and doing my individual presentation, I had 4 minutes of competitors worth of individuals before mine. And I was standing to talking to the guy backstage, and I was like, have I got time to go to the bathroom? And they were like, well, it's up to you. And I'm like, I've got to. And yeah, it was just all that was stressful.
Yeah.
The actual pressure from the show, there was no, like, it's my first one, no expectations. It would have been great to have been able to do my routine. But again, we were sat in the hotel room after prejudging, and I was like, there was a good 3 hours where you didn't know whether you got through to finals in the evening or not. And I said to Dan, I was like, if I'm totally honest, if I make top 10, I do not know how I'm going to get on stage. By this point, the pineapple was really going through me. Loads of like GI distension, loads of gurgling, just the fatigue. I couldn't hold my poses. I didn't have the energy that I had at 𝗵𝗽𝗆 because I was so fucked. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. So for me, it was actually a relief to not get top 10 because that was it. It was done. End of. Food. Yay.
Yes.
The pressure leading up to the O, again, it was like I was saying earlier, it was more about the reflection on Dan's coaching that I was worried about. And, you know, some people may not have agreed with the decision for me to switch to him as my coach. And I was kind of worried about that perception and it having a knock-on effect on his confidence as a coach, and him thinking that there was any blame from I'm awful at overthinking, and I was literally spiraling about how he would feel, what he would think, what other people would think, what if I didn't come in shape. And I mean, there's videos when I had a pump before I went on stage, before the pineapple really hit, where I looked, fuck it, my hamstrings have never been like that, considering I'd slept probably about 20 hours in the previous 10 days. That was it. You know, all these different factors, and we still brought that look. You know, I'm proud of that, and I'm really proud of his ability to get me to that point. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't stressed, that I was worried how that was going to impact him. And then the knock on with our relationship, but that hasn't been an issue at all.
It's so true though, isn't it? Because there are people that are in coaching relationships and they're not getting on with the coach, but they don't know what to do. And perhaps, you know, a lot of people will go with coaches if they've got athletes of a high level, or, you know, they're well known on social media and all these things. That will drive people to get that person as a coach. And they almost feel bad if they've got to swap coaches. And then, like your own scenario there, if they then go back to stage, there's certainly going to be those like, well, my last coach did this, or lots of things in your head maybe if you've done that with multiple coaches. But for sure, I always try and empower people. You've got to find the coaching style that works for you.
Yeah. And it's something since, you know, Dan and I've had the conversation about. So it started off that I was going to have 4 weeks of just kind of doing I had a week where I didn't train, just ate intuitively. Then I kind of inputted, basically I had a photo shoot booked for 3 weeks post show. Oh. And I was like, right, no, it was 2 weeks post show. So I got to a point where I was like, right, I want to try and like just pull my condition back a little bit. Realized that was a really bad idea, and I was just far too fucked, and it was just gonna, wherever I landed was gonna be where it was. And then I had another 2 weeks of eating my own little kind of structure. I had an awareness of what I was eating, but I wasn't tracking. And then we were going to go into the off season, and that was when I got ill. So it was 5 weeks. It was literally Monday that I got my diet plan from Dan. And to start off with, he was like, So I'll give you like X, Y, and Z, and you can just make it fit. You know, this is macros. And I was like, no, 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 no. You're coaching me. I am a client. You need to treat me as a client. I need a plan. And the only time thinking about it, the only time that I struggle with our coaching relationship is when we're doing a check-in. And it happened on Monday. And I had to bear in mind I'd slept like wank, was on antibiotics. I'd come off a week of not training, wasn't feeling very good. I've done my check-in, and he's literally just got up and walked to do his cardio and not said anything. And I was like, I can't deal with that. I feel like shit already. I feel like I look like shit.
Yeah.
You need to say something. And I was like, would you just leave a client without giving them any feedback on their visuals? No, you give it to him. And he was like, yeah, but I also have time to think. And he was like, I don't want to say the wrong thing and upset you. And it's like, well, in that situation, you're not my partner, you're my coach. And if I need to hear this has got sloppy, you need to tell me. There's no point sugarcoating it because you wouldn't with any other client. And it wasn't a case of it was got sloppy. We both knew that the look wasn't great, but we both also knew what the factors. And actually, looking back on that video, I posted it. I can't remember what day it was. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and that was really hard because I felt like, you know, my face is all puffy from infection. I'm all puffy from lack of sleep and just being run down. But I felt I had to post it because it's about showing all aspects, not just the shredded side. Yeah, it's definitely that's the part that I struggle with is his like he needs the time to think, but I need the reply now.
Me and Matt had a similar conversation actually. I said to him, I want to do your check-in and then we'll go for our walk, and then when we get back we'll talk about it because I need some time. So I know what Dan's saying there, but he sort of like says, do I look all right? And I'm like, I just need to process what we're doing next and have that time. So yeah, I can relate. But I would want to know straight away, like when I send my stuff to my coach, I'm like checking my phone. Has he messaged yet? Has he messaged yet? We've got our call to. Has he messaged yet? And it's like you want that. So I've sort of decided it's like almost I can say, okay, I feel like this, but before I decide the next steps, just go for a walk and just let me process. And then we're talking on the walk about other stuff, but I'm like,
so I just need that, like, is it as bad as I think, or am I overthinking it? That's kind of the crux of what I need his reply to be, because then he'll go away and he'll play around with his laptop and he'll do the changes that he needs to, and that's been the whole way through prep. But there were elements, and I feel for him because some days I wanted to know then, some days I didn't, and it's like I can't expect him to know what mood I'm in. So I think I need to find a way of saying I need you to give me some feedback now.
Yeah.
But also he needs to be able to have that time to think about how he's gonna say it. It's a difficult balance.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, before we wrap up, I've got to ask you, what would you say when we talk about being feminine with muscle and body image, clothes, etc.? If someone is listening and, you know, maybe even they're going through a transition of bikini up to figure or anything like that, and you've, of course, made your way through the different categories, other than saying, you know, wear clothes that fit and you feel comfortable in, is there any like personal anecdote you've got with being able to feel feminine and, you know, little things that people could maybe consider when they're in the more muscular categories?
So I do a lot of tying things in knots or using hairbands to cinch them in at the waist.
Nice.
Because a lot of for clothing to fit my shoulders, it has to be wide.
Yeah.
And obviously hoodies just do that. So I'll put a hairband around my hoodie, around my t-shirt, and cinch it in at the waist. I do the same with, like, I've got Dan's explosive fibers joggers on at the moment, and they fall down a little bit. So I put a hairband around them as well. So that's what I'll do if I'm wearing like gym clothes. I wear a lot of like cropped long sleeve tight tops as well, because it's difficult to not feel like people see you as fat.
Yeah.
So if you can show your waist off, cinching things in at the waist kind of allows that normal kind of flow of your physique as a woman. And wearing sort of tighter tops so that you can see that it's muscle and not just covering up with baggies. I wear a lot of like bodycon cotton dresses that are really stretchy when I'm wearing like normal people clothes, because that way it's like they fit in off season, they fit in prep, they're comfortable. They don't dig in. They don't cut in. I'm trying to think where it's like, I went through a stage of searching Depop for a shop called American Apparel because I don't think it exists anymore. And I've got a few of their dresses in certain sizes that now in off season don't fit me. So I've just searched for the same dress in a bigger size and got them off like Depop for 10 quid. I wear a lot of jumpsuits as well when I wear normal people clothes because again they're baggy. You can cinch them in with a belt when you're on prep, but yet they still fit you when you're not on prep. I was really into my fashion before I became a bodybuilder, and I try on days go out somewhere, like days I'm not training, I'll try and wear something that's a bit more kind of expressive of my personality rather than just rocking around in t-shirts and jogging bottoms when we're just staying
Black.
at home. So yeah, those are sort of, yes, black and grey as well. That works quite well.
Yeah, for sure. And when you do get dressed up and do your date nights or anything like that, is Dan quite good at giving you compliments? Is that something that makes you feel more feminine as well?
Yeah, he is very complimentary, which is lovely. And he's always one of those ones that if I put a dress on, he's like, "Oh, you look really nice today." And there's no like, I don't feel like I have to, you know, some people you might have had to go, "Does this look all right?"
Yeah.
He'll say it. Or then there is that, "I don't quite think that fits you anymore."
I love you mentioned that before, and he's like, "You're a bit wider now," and you're like,
Yeah. It's like I've got loads of rider wear like scrunch bum leggings that I just can't wear anymore. And
really
like even the ones without the scrunch bum, the waist doesn't come high enough anymore. So they're like low rise instead of mid rise. And it's like, yeah, just can't wear these.
And you actually mentioned on the last podcast, but we didn't talk about the name of your podcast. So you said today that you've got an episode with you and Dan that will go live. Did you want to mention your podcast as well for the listeners?
I can't remember if we've called it anything. We did talk about calling it what was it? As prescribed. So as RX.
Yeah.
That was what we did talk, but I can't, because he does all the uploading. I can't remember what we actually, whether he names it or what. But we recorded one episode during prep that I've just managed to dig up. Now I've got brain function because it was lost in the archives on his laptop. And that, we'll be releasing that one soon. And then we did one, when was it? What day are we now? Friday. We did one Monday, which is all about the O. So I'll be releasing that one soon as well. But the one we did during prep, halfway through, his mum comes in. So his mum's like gate crashed the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So it's quite a good episode. And she's talking all about him as a kid.
I love stuff like that on the podcast.
He was effectively a test tube baby. Oh. He was one of the first like genetically modified embryos. Well, they didn't genetically modify him, thinking about it. Basically, his mum had 3 boys before him, and she really wanted a girl. So they went to a fertility clinic and they basically removed as many Y chromosomes as they could to increase the likelihood of her having a boy, her having a girl. Didn't work. Although we do laugh and sort of put down his high levels of estrogen and being emotional down to that.
I'm so happy you shared that. That is so hilarious. What a story. Oh my God.
I know I can't remember because I was so fucked. I can't remember all the intricacies to what happened, but it will be a good episode. Because I do not cry. The last time I cried was so have you seen on my stories the engineered muscle salt shakers?
No.
So they've got a little Frenchie on the front. The dude Riz has got a Frenchie called Turbo, and he started up this company, Engineered Muscle. There's going to be lots of stuff coming, and he, without me really knowing, announced me as an athlete this week. So that was really exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, about I think it was midway through the first half of the year, he sent us these salt shakers with a Frenchie on, and obviously we had Ruby then. But this salt shaker, it's glass. We got it to Florida, and I knocked it over, and it smashed on the tiled floor. And because Ruby died back in July, it was like a little bit of Frenchie that had come with us. I literally sat on the floor and cried for like that was the last time I cried for quite a long time.
Did you talk about it on the podcast episode?
Yes, I think we did actually. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that was hard. Like it was so silly because it survived the plane and everything. It was just this little bit of Frenchie with us, and then I smashed it. But we did get back to 2 new salt shakers and a t-shirt. So cheers for that one, Riz.
Thanks, guys. You saved me. So
But if you're a user of L-carnitine, or anyone listening is a user of L-carnitine, and you know that it can be gives you quite a lot of pip, like that sting afterwards. The engineered muscle L-carnitine doesn't, not at all. It's pip free.
I remember when I first got pip, I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, it's yeah, it's
weird.
It stings, but the engineered muscle doesn't. Yeah, so that's my little plug.
Yeah, why not?
Plug to Riz. He's been so supportive during all this prep and everything. So yeah, it's wicked.
Remember shit like that, mate, don't you? It's like when
yeah,
when people show up and they don't have to do much, but you remember that shit because life's tough, right? And when
it's like I put up the GoFundMe page, and the amount of support I got from that was just fucking insane. And I literally, it's one of those things that I didn't have the brain capacity to do a proper thank you when it happened. And I still keep meaning to. I think I have done a thank you, but I need to do like a proper. Now I've got brain function and energy, because we literally couldn't have done that trip without the support from the GoFundMe page. The ability to now, moving forward, like we're planning to go down to our friend's gym in Stroud, Fortress Gym, and do a bloods clinic and a posing seminar there, as a thank you for their support that they've given all through this prep, and various other bits and bobs that we've got in the pipeline. Got another one, South Coast Powerhouse, on the 7th of January. There's going to be a free posing seminar there as well. Anyone on the South Coast that Marty, the gym owner's running. So they've supported me. Like that's where I started bodybuilding, and they've supported me the whole way through. So yeah, it's great to be able to have the energy again to give back to those sorts of things. So thank you to anyone that did donate to the GoFundMe.
I reckon Romana's got some tears in her eyes.
No, sorry. Definitely not. Okay.
I love that. Well, thank you for coming back on, G. You are honestly an absolute legend. And of course,
worries.
I'll put your name in the description on the old gram so people can follow you. But remember, guys, like, share on your stories. We love to see it. And of course, hopefully we will do round 3 at some point, Romana. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely up for that.
Thank you.
No worries.
Hey.